Hey everyone, my name is Mars, like the planet, and this is Housewarmin. Me and my partner have just purchased our very first home, so if you're interested in design, homemaking, or figuring it all out, make sure you subscribe. You guys really seem to like the houseplant tours that I have been posting, and I'm really glad that you do. The first question I always get from people that watch my videos is, how do I take care of a plant? Help me please. So this video is going to be a houseplant for dummies. If you have never taken care of a houseplant before in your entire life, this video is going to show you the very basic minimum steps to keeping plants alive. So let's get into it. The first thing you're going to do is acquire a plant. Now you can either be gifted a plant or you can go to a store, normally grocery stores or Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot or even a farmer's market sell plants all of the time. The three plants that I'm going to recommend to beginner houseplant owners are pothos plants, snake plants, and ZZ plants. Now ZZ plants and snake plants are one of the easiest plants to take care of. They do not require a lot of light or a lot of sunlight, so you can just pick those guys up, bring them home, sit them in a corner, and they should be fine. So let's start with a scenario. You go into a store, let's say Walmart or Home Depot, and you see a plant. You're going to pick up the pothos plant and you're going to examine it first. You're going to make sure that there aren't a bunch of dead leaves on it. Are there bugs on it? Is the soil super dry? The plant should look nice and healthy before you take it home, and that's going to set you up for the best success. You take the plant home, and before you walk out of the store, you need to decide, are you going to keep the plant in the original pot that it comes in, or are you going to replant it? I personally like all of my plants to be in terracotta pots. That is the brown porous pots that you normally see that have a drainage hole at the bottom. Now you don't have to put your plants in a terracotta pot. You can also put them in a plastic pot, or you can put them in a decorative pot. If you put them in a decorative pot, they normally will just have a nice design on the outside, but they will not have a drainage hole at the bottom. You can just buy a decorative pot. That's a tongue twister. You can just buy a decorative pot and put your plant inside, and you are perfectly good to go. If you do buy a terracotta pot, you want to make sure that you may have to buy soil. Now, sometimes when you're transferring one pot to the other, you should have enough soil, but if you don't and you have to buy soil, make sure you get potting mix. Do not get regular soil. Do not get soil from out of the ground. Do not get just dirt or sand or anything like that. Make sure the bag says potting mix for house plants or potted plants. A lot of times the soil that is outside, or the soil or the dirt that is meant to go outside into the ground, is way too dense for plants that are going to be sitting in a pot their entire life. So now we have our plant, we have our pot picked out, we have our soil. Now let's go home and figure everything out. So when you get your plant home, congratulations, you are now the owner of your first houseplant. You need to decide where to put it. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the tag on the houseplant, and it's going to tell you a ton of information. It's going to have the name of the plant. It should have the scientific name of the plant. It's also going to have the amount of sun that it needs, as well as the amount of water that it needs. When you look at the tag and it has a full sun, this means that the plant needs full sun. So you want to put this in a very bright window, and the sun rays need to actively be hitting the plant for more than 6 hours out of the day. If it has half of a sun, this means that it needs partial shade. So you still want to put this close to a window, but it just needs bright light. The sun rays should not be directly hitting the plant. If it has a darkened sun, this means that you can put it a little bit farther into a room, and it is a low light plant. Also, you may want to take this time to look up your plant and look up the things that it needs. You can type in the regular name, or you can type in the scientific name, and there are tons of websites and tons of videos that tells you exactly what your plant needs. I also downloaded a compass app onto my phone so I could see exactly what type of windows I had. If you have a north-facing window, this means that this area of your room will not be getting sun during the day. It will just get very low light. So your low light plants will be happy into this room. If you have a east-facing window, this will get very bright morning sun, so your partial shade plants would do very well in this room. It is also a bright indirect light source. If you put it in a west-facing window, this will get that hot afternoon sun. So if your plant needs full sun, this may be a good place to put it because it's going to get those hot rays at the end of the day. You also want to be careful because during this time the sun is very hot, so if you put a plant very close to a west-facing window, it can burn the leaves if it's not prepared for that. If you have a south facing window, this window is going to get sun all throughout the day. So your full sun and your partial shade plants are going to love this window. So now let's talk about water. Water is one of the easiest yet hardest things to get right about a plant. If you give a plant too much or too little water or the wrong type of water, it can easily send a plant out of whack and even kill the plant. A pothos plant isn't too finicky with water, so you should be super easy with caring for a plant like that. You want to look at your tag again and look at the raindrops. If you see one raindrop, this plant requires minimal moisture. You can let it dry out completely between waters, and this means you can water it 1 to every few weeks. If you see 2 raindrops, this plant requires moderate watering, and you want to wait until the top 1 inch to 2 inch has dried out, and it usually means that the lower layers are still moist. This means that you'll water this plant probably once a week or so. If your plant has 3 raindrops, this plant needs consistent water, so you're probably going to be watering it every 3 days or so. Now, when you look at a plant and you're trying to determine does this plant need water or not, you need to look at the color of the soil. If the color is super dark and rich and you can stick your finger in and dirt clings to your finger, this plant is moist and probably does not need water. If the soil is a regular dry soil and you stick your finger in, it's super dusty, it's super dry, this plant probably needs water. If the soil has completely pulled away from the sides, the plant has shriveled down, this plant desperately needs water and you should give it a really good soak. So when you're ready to water your plant, you can use a cup, you can use anything you want, you can bring it directly to the sink. If you're giving your plant just a little bit of water like you do for your weekly waterings, just let the water run until the water runs completely through the bottom. You want to make sure all of the plant has water, as well as pouring it on top of the leaves just to clean them off as well. If you're giving your plant a deep soak, now this is something you may want to do for your bigger house plants that you don't water as often, or the plants that do not need a lot of water, maybe every couple of weeks, like your snake plants or your ZZ plants that you're watering maybe once a month, you can give them a deep soaking. This means you want to let the water run for maybe a minute or so, letting the water completely soak into all of the layers of the plant. So here's what to do if your plant is dying. Now, naturally, leaves from the bottom will fall off and turn brown. That does not mean your plant is dying. That just means your plant is growing and it is healthy. If the leaves are wilted and yellow, that means that your plant is overwatered. If the leaves are dry and brown, that means that it is underwatered. If the leaves are bleached out, that means that it's getting too much sun and the chlorophyll cannot process. If there are small or weak leaves, that means that the plant is not getting enough sunlight and you may want to move it. If you are super clueless about what's going on with your plant, you can't figure it out, don't throw a Hail Mary and just start pouring anything and everything into your plant, because that can completely stress it out. Take your time, just cut off the dead leaves, make sure it has enough water, make sure it has the correct sunlight, and sometimes you may just have to leave your plant alone. Sometimes a plant will rebound, sometimes depending on the season, especially if it's winter, maybe your plant's just going into dormancy. Let your plant work through the problems if you really cannot figure it out. Your plant is not going to turn into a new plant overnight. If the leaves are already dying, they're not going to turn back green. You just need to cut them off. Sometimes you need to cut the plant completely back and just let it regrow. Luckily, a lot of the plants that are in these big box stores are super easy to take care of, and there are tons of information and tons of videos out there that you can watch if you're unsure of how to take care of the house plant that you have. I want you to remember that a lot of these plants originate from the tropics, they originate from Asia or South America, and plants are not meant to go inside. They are naturally meant to go outside. So sometimes we cannot recreate those perfect living conditions inside our home. And sometimes, depending on our climate, depending on how much sun we get a day, depending on the humidity in our home, some plants are just not going to be suited for our home. A lot of plants I've tried, I just cannot figure out what's wrong with them. They immediately die, and I know what works for me and what doesn't work for me. Clearly, pothos have worked really well for me since I have so many types of them, and that's why I recommend them to you, because I've seen across the board that they are super easy to care for, and they are super easy and adaptable. I do hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you learned a little bit of something to care for your new plant. Please leave a comment down below if you have any questions, but I say this at the end of every single houseplant video that I do. Do not compare yourself to others. It's okay to kill plants. It's okay to buy a new one and just toss it out and learn better next time. It's okay if your plant gets too much water. It's okay if it gets too much sun. We all make mistakes because we're all human. Do not go on Instagram comparing yourself to these big, beautiful houseplants because every single home is different and every single person is different. Your plants are amazing. They're gonna do well. You're doing great, sweetie. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I post new videos every single Wednesday, so I will see you guys next week. Bye.